is on hip strengthening. That's going to be a little bit of a theme today, is hip strength. And it will follow through with hip flexibility, but what I want us to position our bones on is our bolster is sort of like spine-wise. In a moment it will be, but I want you to sit so you're facing towards your rolled up blanket at the foot of your mat, and keep a simple movement pattern of putting your legs onto that roll, or the lower bones of the legs. And to be a detective, how you get into this first position, I think is true. So I have to scoot my hips forward on the bolster, so my seat is towards the short end, towards the legs. I sort of don't know exactly how my blanket will be for me until I lower down, and I'm attempting to get as much of my back on that bolster, and then I roll the shoulders down to just tap onto the floor next to the blanket. So the blanket is reserved for my brain, and really to find that occipital touchdown of your brain focus, so the centered piece connected to the blanket. And the blanket is not really puffing up your head, it's actually helping you stretch the neck, but only so much that you're comfortable. So this will be one where everyone will have probably a little different version of this neck support. So if you notice, well, I feel as if my neck is not calming down, you might take the blanket part that's closest to your shoulders and make it a little bit of a roll. And some of you might decide, nope, this flat position is really good. So once you have come back and forth on the bolster and back on the bolster, until you feel like you have as much of your body shape on top of it, there's a little bit of a hyper motion in the rib cage. So let's put a sandbag to either that space or below that space to level out your torso. So if you have two sandbags, you can put one on the top thighs and then one to your ribs. And if you have one, you might be very individually kind of customizing in the moment which feels most supportive. You want to feel like you're kind of in a very kind of narrow shape, like you're trying to fit yourself into a narrow line of energy. And then if the feet need to separate, be sure the blanket is there to hold the legs at the base. You can always push it with your feet forward and make it a little bit more perfect, so it's kind of wedged under your ankles. It's not going to harm if you kind of nudge that blanket forward, and then you're pushing down your legs so they do kind of work into those holding kind of the pressure that you make into the blankets makes this little pocket for your lower leg. And then take your hands back, get a hold of the belt, and make the hand position extremely far out on the belt so that you're barely noticing that there's a grip connection with your hands and your belt. And thus the focus turns inwards. So the eyes might layer open and closed, and then eventually find an inner gaze to awareness of your breathing. And notice that full contact of the ribs with the breath movement. So we're opening the front layers, clearly even the front of the hips. So there is zero flexibility requirement in the hips for this position, but there is quite a bit of core range. And it's opposite of rounding your back. So if it seems not extremely defined as a back bend, you can always make it more so by feeling your shoulder blades really hug into the bolster. And if you're too far back on the bolster, then you can always come back up and resituate yourself. So you feel like you just touch down You'll likely slide back even more with time, but accepting where you're at to keep the ribs and the thoracic chamber opening. So give a few more moments. Now you can hold the belt, bring the hands in closer, and then maybe stretch the arms straight back so they're hovering over the ground. And you might decide that it's just perfect to have your elbows open and the hands seizing the belt, so there is a collaboration on both lungs. So feeling that grip, put some energy into the lungs, that little tightening, that delivery of inhale. And on the exhalation, you might feel your elbows naturally get heavy. Finally, in this position, I would encourage you to notice the spine itself and the energy along the spine. And feel if you can let the spine really settle into the bolster, especially with this curve, right? The opposite of your daily curve pattern. Now slide the hands completely off holding the belt, and then start to move your arms down so that you feel your elbows and the back of your hands relaxing on the floor. So it seems kind of like a cactus pose, but the arms are a little lower, right? They're kind of starting to draw a line on the side of the body, elbows lowering down. And then we'll move the sand away and give a try for a reclining cobbler's pose with the bolster underneath so much of you. So I would consider, if I have this length here in the chest zone, and then I walk the feet onto the ground besides my bolster, this is a good start. And then just sense where the back of the pelvis touches into the bolster. So here's where you'll need to decide, do you want to keep this much bolster under your mid back, right? And take Baddha Konasana, feet together, knees open. Or you'll take, my preference is this one, as I push my feet, lift my hips just a little bit, and then push my bolster down so it's still underneath the upper back of my pelvis. And it would be still underneath around, if I drew a line from my navel around to the back, it's about the line. And then take the Baddha Konasana pose there. So it's up to you, and sometimes it's because your feet slip off the bolster the other way. So it's not a big choice you have. You can use your belt on this one as well to get around the tops of your feet and pull. It's a slightly aggressive version. So I go with what I can do here. And then even though my feet have a little bit of sliding on the bolster, I try to push my feet together fairly intensely to strengthen in my hips. So I want you to try for that, versus if you want to use your belt, you can finagle that. It does require a bit of kind of concentration in your balance. And it's just more flexibility monitoring. So I'm working with the strength, but you get to decide, okay? Not even your neighbor is going to tell you what to do. So with the knees open and the feet kind of clamoring for pressure, notice if the actual hip bones can become part of the intensity. Is it all about your feet pushing? And likely it's true, right? It's hard to get these hips to kind of activate in this odd positioning. So I want you to bring the knees to point up and the feet besides the bolster again, and push down into your feet. Now, if your bolster is high on your back, now this is the time to slide it down a little bit further. So it's around from the navel, if you drew a line back right there. Push into your feet on the sides of the bolster, your feet are on the ground. Lift up the hips, okay, so it's a bridge pose. And you're holding the sides of the bolster with your ankles, so it's kind of squeezing in. Feel if your knees can draw slightly inwards, as if you had a pretty big block between them. you're trying to hold that block. Okay, so the glutes are warmed up. This streamlines the hip fibers into the whole leg musculature. And then you're going to need your arms for this. So you'll reach to the bolster, and you're going to turn the bolster underneath you. So you're going to pivot it to the right or left, and then turn it so it's horizontal. This takes a heck of a lot of rear strength. So you've got to really get that rear in action. So you're pushing down to your feet, lifting your glutes, and then slide the bolster under the back of your pelvis, or the pack of the pelvis is kind of a good way to think of it, pelvis pack. And then, oh, feels so good. You can just lay your hips on the bolster again. Okay, so bring the knees, the feet off the floor, knees already up. And then take that leg position so you decide how far this bolster should be back underneath your pelvis. So for some of us, we don't want it too far back, and we certainly don't want it too far forward. You want to kind of feel when your feet come up and your knees pop up. And let the legs wander right to left. Just feel a little bit of the swishing until you make a decision on the positioning of your bolster. Swishing to work on positioning. Positioning, swishing. Okay, so let the knees monitor motion. And then as your movement comes to a still point, lift up the legs. Feel the leg musculature in this elevated and also kind of refreshing category from where they just were pushing through the feet. So feel that the legs are kind of spring up, and then bring your hands back overhead, or actually wherever that belt ended up, and get a hold of the belt. And as you hold your belt, let's bring the hands to hold it, and bring the belt so it lifts up towards the ceiling with both arms equally reaching. And you might let your eyes close and simply feel where you have reaction in your body, where the most tone is happening. If there's any tone at all, it could be your shoulders, it could be your core muscles. And then let the left knee bend and lower that foot. And as you bend your right knee, you might need to turn the thigh out a little bit. Whatever you need to do is fine. But get the belt under your right foot. And I want you to make sure it's unbuckled so you have the whole length of this belt. And you're going to work on the pattern of pushing up into the belt, and let your right hip still kind of land into the bolster. So feel these kind of two worlds, right? You kind of bifurcated the leg. You do have this opposition going on. You've got the hip landing and the foot pushing. So it's a little bit confusing in the mind sphere. But when you're lifting up into your belt, pushing the foot up, I want you to push forward, but resist with your arms now. If your shoulders are gripping, slide your hands down on the belt so you can start to use your chest. And your left leg could be doing anything it wants. It could be straight down on that blanket is really nice. That works great. Glad it's there. It's a surprise welcome ingredient to my pose. So feel where your foot is kind of pushing a little forward into the belt. So what I want you to work towards is to activate all the way up into the hip, but feel it as both strength work and range of motion. Range of strength. Okay, can you get your calf to stretch? Before you shift the pose, feel where the belt is on the foot, even if you need to kind of loofah your foot a little bit until you get there. And simply feel, it's a new idea for a yoga belt. They can make a belt for these poses for the feet, huh? So feel the flesh of the bottom of the foot really trying to open. Like at the ball of the foot, maybe it's a little higher for you so that you can feel the foot so it's really flexing and stretching your calf. And then relax the toe energy. So just feel it as a foot itself in the belt. And cross the belt, so you're going to hold the belt together. Reach up with your left hand to the belt, and then cross that right leg over to the left. But what's critical here is that you go slow, but you also keep pushing into the belt with your foot. So it's not about how far you go at all, right? See if you can find a credible kind of wave of circulation from the top of that outer right knee, maybe not the top, but the side of the knee. And then it layers to this IT band on the right leg. If it's really tempting for you to let the legs slowly lower down to the left side, but maintain that you're pressing with your foot. Yeah, good. And keep there, keep with that emphasis. The bolster underneath the pelvis keeps you in a mild inversion. The leg down on the blanket really helps me from turning the thigh out on the bottom. So it's kind of working. Then emphasize the straight leg. Belly moves with the breath. Now fine tune the circulation at the top of the right thigh, the quadricep. Now there's a couple layers, right? It's toning. So when you bend through that right knee and you start to just gently bring the leg back, keep it simple. I want you to take the belt off of that foot and stretch the right leg down and put a sandbag across the very top of the thighs, okay? And take a simple about 15, 20 seconds here and feel the energy at the front of the thigh. Remember, if your bolster feels too high up on your back, even a little bit, sometimes it can be too much on the low back. You might have to kind of push it with your elbows downwards, even kind of just nudge it. So notice the circulation, and maybe it's really subtle for your cells, like in your hip. On the right side, the left side, kind of feel. And then take off the Sand-Aid. And then bring the right, actually you could keep the right leg down, bring the left knee in. Be careful here on the low back, make sure you have enough support under your back with your bolster. And then bring the foot a little closer and belt underneath your left foot and lift up. And energetically press that foot up, but then push it forward to strengthen into your hip. Even if it is a challenge with keeping that right leg kind of not stirred up, it just lets go. Let your eyes release so they're not so deeply pressing to look at your pose, maybe closing and sense the sensation of the legs stirred up. Okay, and if your hands are pulling on the belt with a little bit energy of moving the foot, see where your maximum length is in the bottom of that, the back surface of that left leg. And then close off the belt, hold it with the right hand only, and left arm can either stretch open or reach out in any directional expansiveness on the chest that feels comfortable for you. So if it's tingling in your arm, maybe that's too far out, too far up behind you. But then you have this drive of motioning your left leg, and with the belt under your foot, it's going to lead you across. But if you didn't have this belt, the leg would not likely have directional eagerness to go across, right? It would probably flop down. So with that awareness and understanding of your body's limits, you're placing it in a position where you're challenging its limits. So considering the crossover Interesting for you to compare the actual measurement on each side, and if you can notice if it's similar, not necessarily with how it looks, but how it feels. Probably a several nodding of your heads on that one. The sensation is likely a little different. Keep the right leg relaxing. Okay. Now you get to decide how much pressure you push into that left foot. But what we're building up for is legs up with the sand on the feet. So we're building up the hips so that is almost easy to do with the sand above and putting some strength into your hips. So these are all good setups to do hip openers after, right? So you get them warm, heated, strength building in the fibers. A little combination. Okay, now downstream is okay with your left leg. We're going to start to bend through that left leg. And now when you come back up, hopefully your fibers on the side of the leg felt a little bit of that circulation. So now when you lift back up, take the belt, actually lift both feet this time up. And we'll push the feet out. So that comparative buckle up, the comparative sandbag when we put on the top of the thighs will pass on this side. So we have an idea of that front rim. We'll get to it though. So if you push out into the feet, notice the legs rocking side to side. And I want you to try to do this, even if it's feeling sketchy in your balance, like you're going to fall off your bolster. You're close to the floor, so it won't be too dramatic. But you want to have a wide stance with your legs and notice if the knees have a lot of curve, like they look like they're pulling in together. Make sure the feet push out, but also the energy around the knee cap still moves open too. Just don't need to have a knock-knee version of this. So rocking side to side, and then have the feet find a still point. So you're pushing out. Hopefully your belt is strong. If it's one of the D-rings, it might be slippery, right? A buckle, firm buckle is really good for this. And feel the heels push out. Likely your feet are going to turn in a little bit here. I think you can tell what we're doing. Yeah, toes in, heels outwards. Belt is on full challenge, right? It's fully tightened across. It's a tightrope now for a cat to walk across, huh? So when you press out, I want you to feel where your hip circulation is. If you can feel your sitting bones spatially open. The concentration is at the top of the thighs. Some of this is kind of a new wave of moving into the shape. So you've done all these. It's just a new wave for the hip strength. Sometimes it's how we sequence them. It's the sequence that matters. Okay. Now, when you come out, you're going to bend through the knees, and I would encourage you to keep your belt around the upper thigh. So bend the knees enough to slide the belt off your heels, and then get your sandbag and place it up over the knees. And maybe you can get the sand on the bottoms of your feet. Okay, if you can find that cooperation with your levers to get arms to hold sand, to put on feet, and then feet to push sand up, and then hands to get to the belt. I know, there's a lot to do at once. And then tighten all of that down at the belt level so that your legs, right, are in this zone of tone zones. Okay, and manage the belt so that it's very concentrated and it's up towards the center to the upper. The thicker part of your thigh would be best. You can find that belt. You don't want to cut off your circulation, so just make it pretty firm. That's fine. And then feel where the feet flex, and then let the hands move maybe the blanket so it's minimal under your head. Let's say you're used to this pose with your blanket higher. like a little higher fold, you're welcome to take that. If you want to make that comfort, that's completely fine. It might work better for some of us to have a little higher blanket for legs up. Okay, so choose or keep the arms open, and the arms are in that cactus goalpost position. Good, so let the feet find both the direction of up, but then a little forwards. Right, that's vertical. For most of us, when we think they're straight up, they're usually a little bit over our core. It's almost always the case. So bring them a little forward. So you're creating some strength in the lower abdomen. Kind of perks up a tiny bit, not to bother your back. And then feel the tailbone kind of wedge down into the bolster. And your inverted pattern to flush the legs, but also to relax the organs from their downward pull with gravity. So feeling the effects of gravity in the concentration of your legs. Give it a go to flex your feet. Make sure that that's occurring. It seems an obvious description of your feet from the get-go here that they've got to flex with a sandbag, but are you honestly stretching the calves fully? If your feet get numb, it's too much, right? You know that numbness is a message, right? To back off and change it. We're all unique in our capacity. Okay. And then when you do change this shape, I want you to have the belt still kind of on you. I don't want you to completely take it off your leg. So just keep that in mind, even if we loosen up the strand. Keep it on you. So when you bend your knees, feel when you start to have too much of that belt pressure. So notice when that happens, and I'd like you to try to bend your knees, as long as you can, so you feel your knees moving slowly towards your chest. So with the belt, it might help you move slower. Work on like a slow leg press. Okay. Now I'm just going to simply loosen up my belt. I'm going to keep it so it's barely feeling like it's on my legs. I know I'll use it in a while, so I'll leave it in a loose loop. Loose loop. Okay. Bending, use that concentration to stretch your back. Feels great to get the back stretched out. And now, happy backs, we're going to move our sand away and then bring your hands to your bolster and push it ever so carefully forward, away from underneath your low back and your pelvis. And then as you are pushing it forward, I may be going painfully slow, but it's not pain, it's just feeling that every little part of the back touch down. And then once you make that touchdown with your tailbone, I want you to put your feet on the bolster. Make sure that you can easily get them on there. Don't make it too close, but not too far away. And now we move the belt close to the knees and we tighten it up and let all those moments of just letting your back center on the ground be felt here. So imprinting your back into the floor, like a little leaf print, right? Spine prints. Okay, I'm going to adjust my belt so it's very high up to right above the knees. And then place your hands just to the front of the thighs, wherever they naturally touch, and it doesn't hurt your shoulders, it's comfortable. And feel that you push into the legs, and then like you slide up, like your skin it moves, right? That connective tissue moves. Yeah, and even your pants layer should be fine. You don't have to get bare with this one. You want to feel like you can just feel that it moves. Now, when you press, you're going to feel the back touching and then make more of an imprint behind the heart. So the hips start to lift up. and you'll lift up your hips, right? So you're in bridge pose as you know it. And we've done like 3 different bridges already now. So this is like bridge to the third power. Bring your arms overhead and feel the feet to push down, keeping the blanket either under your head or remove it. If it doesn't, you don't like it, get rid of it. What's important is that you feel that power through the legs and then lower down your spine and your arms forward and feel when the arms touch down at the same time as your lower back. If you get your arms down before, which is typical, or maybe it's the opposite for you. I think we're all just unique. One of them usually goes down faster. So I want you to try to calibrate this alternating drawbridge. Keep coming into it, come back up. Good. Feel when you lift up your hips. And then as you lower your spine, kind of notice, do the arms even matter for the contact activity of your back? I think they do, but it's up to you. So I might even stop about almost when I get my spine all the way down, and then quicken up that pace of the arms so that they all meet nearly the same time. It's complementary. So take one more complementary drawbridge and feel when you lift up what works for you. Maybe you do 2 drawbridges right now, so you do them a little faster. Kind of feel what works for the spine's motion. And these are really elementary, energetic motions in our spine, right? Cat, cow, and down dog would be a little more intermediate for that. We will get to those for sure today, but feel this motion, experience this. And then the last time you come up, I want you to get that hip layer open one more time, the front of the hips. So get a block and place it under the back of your pelvis, either flat or mid-height, you choose. And then you're going to stretch your legs down. So remember, we did this a little while ago where we had the legs straight down, but we had the bolster under us. So the front of the hip bone's open. And my emphasis here is that the abdominal circulation is softening, but it's also toning. So it's kind of 2 in 1. And it doesn't feel like I have to do a bunch of abdominal gripping to be here. You could add your sand on the top of the thighs. You could keep it just bare, that's fine too. But noticing these hip flexors, the top of the thigh, all the way into the pelvic basin, and then your breath basin is right in the center. So let the abdomen move with the breath. Essential if you feel your back gripping. Really breathe, not that you have to breathe through pain. And if it is difficult for you, then the legs you don't want them straight. But if it's too much for your back, you come back up with your feet on your bolster and you stay in the pose like all of the rest of us, just different with the leg form. That's all. Not lesser than, it's just different. So I'm going to try to get my shoulders down and under. This is my final bridge pose. So I'm going to get some finality with the expression of the hips up. I like this with the block because a block is defined versus a bolster. It's just a little bit more firm. Okay. So with that position of the legs, you're going to start to put your palms down and then guide your feet back up onto the bolster. Since the legs are kind of stuck together, as you lift up your hips, I'm going to slide the block away, and we're going to really free up the position of our hips now. So slide to the spine, guides down, ease the back. And then when your spine is completely, well, it feels flat-ish, right? Maybe it's not perfectly flat, but it's down. Bring the hands to the belt and slide the belt down so that now I unbuckle it. I just want you to be sure your back stays in that flat order, not pulling your knees in quite yet before we come along here. Okay, so what we'll take is the knees Carefully windshield wiper side to side. So feel from your waist, actually your waist is now moving. So you're gonna feel your knees move, so your waist and the side layer. And you might kind of swing your arms back and maybe reach one arm and the knees go left, the right arm back, and then the left arm. Be kind of wacky about it. So you get this connection of the leg side and the side waist. That's the key. Yeah, and if you feel really uncoordinated, that would be ideal. It's just kind of confusion on the coordination activities. Okay, and then feel when the arms are stretched open. This is our typical world. Right? Arms are out, knees side to side. Okay, so now we're going to bring our knees in center and then kick the bolster to the right side. Just be aware of what's around you so you don't knock anything precious over. By now we figured out not to put that around the mat. But with this blanket down here, I'm not a big fan of the blanket down at the base for my feet. So I'm going to push it away, but you might like it in addition on top of your bolster. So one thing I could see that people might enjoy is to have this blanket either under their pelvis, because that'll add height to your hips, or on top of the bolster. Okay, and you might not even feel like you need that, but it's always a bonus if you have a little higher height on the side. So when I lower my right leg and take the left leg over to the bolster, the sand could go on the exterior left thigh, but maybe feel first versus adding more feeling. How does that arrangement work right now in your ideal range of motion? How are you arranging your range? So if it can go further or less, then you don't want to put your sand on until you're ready for that. Okay, so you're going to take that sand across the left outer leg and feel where the weight is. Distribute it closest to the knee that you can comfortably do so. Add a ball to the sacrum. If you prefer no ball, that's perfect. You choose, but let the ribs really open quality to the left side. Okay, so we're perfect pace right now where we're going. So nice work. So keep that motion so that the leg crosses over to the right. And I have a blanket on my bolster, so it does make it a little simpler for my circulation and my back muscles. Feels easier. Okay, be aware of the chest dissecting in the center and opening to the left. And maybe let your head roll to the left side and center the eyes in. Breathe to affect the concentration in your body. So you kind of land. And if there's little tendrils in the hip that you notice are kind of waking up right in the pose, just let them gradually open up. So you're not trying to force it to be the deepest hip opener. There might be a layering and various areas that feel this, not just the leg or the hip, but the back and the waist. So use your reclining crossover for myriad of areas in your body. It might be the pose that gets you kind of sleepy after all those previous positions. Okay, we'll add one piece. So anyone that wants to bend the right knee a little further, and that would mean your foot would go up higher towards your rear. You might try to kind of hook that foot underneath. So you're bending the right leg, and you might reach towards the right foot with your left hand. And if it does happen to get a hold of the foot, notice the top of the foot, and so the foot has no flexion, right? There is flexion in your foot. It's just not woke at the moment. But notice the front of the right thigh, and you kind of can let it be drawn back, just as sensitive as you can be, the little areas that are affected. And those of us that are passing on it will get to the next stage in just a moment. It does possibly deepen the stretch in your left hip when you have the right foot kind of ordered around, pulled. Good. So now when we do let go of that foot, let the left hand relax, open it out. Okay, and thoughtfully exchange your sides. So noticing what could we do between the sides that would be enriching, right? It would likely be something in our stomach and our core strength. So what I want us to propose on this one is when you move your sand away, I think some of you have a ball. I think most people do. Okay, well, let's go with that anyway. If you don't have a ball, you could probably put a block under your back, huh? So you're going to roll onto the back so the ball is under your sacrum. It was already close-ish, wasn't it? And then you'll spring the legs up. If you're a little shaky, that means you're doing it right. This is called shaky asana. Okay, so legs are up, the ball is on the sacrum, right? So it's the tail end of my spine. It's my spine tail. That's kind of what that is, isn't it? Spine tail. And if you don't have a ball, you can use a block. It's just not going to be the same. It'll be a little bit easier actually with a block because the ball is not, it's rounded, right? So it's hard to balance. So put your arms straight down by your sides, fingers facing down towards the foot of your mat. And you're going to move your legs together, and they're tightly bound together. They're closed in. You're going to move them forward. Okay, so it feels like it kind of drags me down, and then you'll bring your legs straight up. So we call this 90, right? It's 90, 60, 30 or 40 degree angles. And I don't spend energy on lining up my angles. It's on what works best for my core. So I move my legs forward. Feel if you can let your feet not be flexed for this version versus pressing. I can be a little aggressive on the flexors and then come back up. Now, if this just feels darn good to have your legs this way and maybe bending them a little bit, take what feels good in your back, okay? And then I want you to try this without the ball. So you'll put your feet down and lift up the hips, just scoot the ball out to the side. And then bring your arms straight down, nothing under your sacrum or your tail's end. And then as your legs go forward from 90 degrees, feel when you get to that point that it's really rivaling the top of your thighs and they're gripping excessively. They're still gripping right now. Now, feel if you can plug in the low back, the place where your ball was, but a little bit above there. You're trying to seal that into the floor. So your belly might bulge when you try that. It might just kind of spring up your diaphragm. So I want you to try to press that down. A sandbag would be good right here, actually, because that would make that happen. But we'll try to do this authentically on our own. And then you'll bring your legs back up. Mine kind of came up on their own already. All right, so bring your knees into your chest on their own. See if you can do that without pulling on them, on their own, knees towards the upper corners of the chest. Squeeze them in. Right, keep it simple so you're using your core. You're not just kind of relying on your arms to pull that in. Right, using your lower abdominal and the back abdominals, right, around the back of the posterior spine here, or actually that spot. Okay, now as your knees fumble in so they close in together, you're going to find your bolster and see if you can be creative getting it over to the other side. How am I going to do this? I'm going to actually get a hold of it and drag it over with my arms, but you could kick it over there. I like the blanket on top this time, so I don't want to lose that. So I'm going to scoot a little to my right side of my mat and then take the position. What I want you to avoid is kind of flinging your legs down. So keep contact with your back on the ground. As much of it will feel loaded and not kind of slightly pinched up. And then bring your left leg straight down and cross the right leg to the bolster. Keep it simple. You might be someone who wants to do things like figure 4 pose like this, kind of while you're playing with this pose, which might be worth exploration right now. So that's kind of your exploration option if you want to linger in different poses while we're doing this one. So the ball is to that tail of the spine tail. I like that. You have to really study that a little bit and see if that's a true topic, spine tail. And then place the sand on the exterior right leg when you're ready, not until you're ready for that sand. And then feel if you're rolling into your right rib cage or left rib cage, and feel if you can also open the chest. And then feel where the arm opens and your head rolls to the right. Arriving slowly. Now the left leg might already be bending. It might already be setting itself ready to work on a different energetic pole. So you might start to bend that left knee purposely, and almost as if you're trying to put that left foot closer towards your rear. Just kind of see if it naturally goes into that bend. And just gradually, you might put your right hand to the left foot. You might stay right here and work on the twist. And really work on the rotation through your waist. Breathing only helps. Now, those of us that want to add to this will bring the hand that's easiest to get to your foot, likely your right hand. And let's say the ball's in the way, you might have to kind of reach around that. Sometimes it's too far out. So noticing how you can stretch the top of the lower thigh, and then how the pelvis is. It's tricky. The pelvis is a little bit formed like we do in sage poses. It can only move, or the legs can only move right when you reach them out of your back muscles, but not so much like the tailbone moving. So just noticing where your pelvis concentration is, accepting your left arm might be straight back if you're holding your left foot with your right hand. All these different spots. Yeah, good for staying with us. This is definitely an interesting sequence for the hip programming. It's a little specific, so if it's kind of dry, then think of it as your intellectual part of your yoga practice today. It's kind of studious. You should get credit for it, huh? Have a course. Okay, now if your left thigh feels some stretch from the right hand holding, great. Just be careful you're not gripping your foot so deeply that it's hurting your foot, right? You don't want to pull with such tension. You want to feel like you're guiding your leg there, the left top thigh. Now the deal though really was the right hip here. Some of us maybe get into holding the left foot, but the deal is really this, the sanded part. So let's let that kind of work its way a little further. So I'm gonna let go of my left foot, and then the leg kind of swings down a tiny bit. It's on the floor, so it can't swing much. But now with this ball, we're not gonna roll in the sacrum like we did last time, but I want you to feel how your rib cage, I can't make you feel this, but notice how you've got it's a dissection a little bit. You're rolling your right leg over so the left side of the waist is going left. But it's also trying to rotate to the right for the twist. Okay? So manage this opening in the right arm for a few more moments. Roll your head to the right. Be sure you've got a little of this in your practice. Okay. And now before we come out, can you work so that as if you're trying to move your tailbone or your pelvis towards your feet? So it's not like you're kind of slumped open, but you're like activating, moving your tail towards your feet. So you have some strength rippling through your core. Okay, so we're gonna kind of utilize this connectivity. So you'll take the ball away. Okay, you might feel stuck. You're not sure where you're moving next. I think I have an idea. Okay, so you'll take off your sand, and now we'll be simple. We'll bring the right leg a little higher up over on that left side. Let's roll onto our back and be really safe with our back. So we'll cross the right foot to the left knee. All been in this position before. We even started in yoga. We bring the right knee open, right? So it's starting to go to figure four pose. But let's see, we got our bolster next to that side. So kind of push it downwards towards the foot of your mat. Feel the right knee open, okay? And take a block and place the block, the short end of the block, hold that with your hands, and then press that into the right inner leg and just kind of nudge it open. So the right side of your spine is probably at the low back, the lumbar, and below at the tail of your spine is probably a tiny bit up. Okay, so press that inner thigh open. Breathe. Okay, now switch sides, right foot down, left knee open, try to kind of go right into it. Block. As pushing to the left inner leg. Now, where do you touch with the block, the short end? I mean, you can kind of massage those tissues like you're trying to move those fibers, that skin, to stretch it. Well, you might as well use the block because it's so rare you're going to get a massage to this lymph area, which so desperately could use that lymph flush, right? You got this far healthy. Keep going. Okay. Got to keep working on it. Never a dull day. Okay. So as I move the block, I'm now block free from that moment, or ball free for that matter. We're going to come up. Now, I do want us to think about when you come up to all fours, how do you like to do that, right? Some of us like to roll up and sit and then go there like boat pose. I like that version. I think the best. Rolling and crawling is, I'm not quite good at that yet, so I'll work towards that. So let's try rolling up and then get a hold of the legs so you get a feel of the back of legs, even if you fall back and forward until you get up, and just keep trying. But when your feet are forward of the knees, assuming they still are there in that same pattern, use the massive grip of your arms from your back into your arms to hold you here, as if your back is doing part of that work. You might be surprised at how effective that can sometimes be. It's a sometimes deal. So when you're going to hands and knees, we're going to relate to this part of the back. The only difference is now soon enough you're going to be on your hands, which has its ups and downs too. But feel this position and then put your feet down, bring your arms forward, up above the knees, and then try to sit yourself upright. Okay. Lean back for a moment. If you can't see me, lean back, put my feet on the floor, and then come back forward. Okay, now take the concentration now, and we're going to move this to hands and knees. So if you kind of notice, the beauty of this is there's no hand pressure, but it's that difficult, right? It's not easy. So I want you to take a blanket. You're going to want, actually just take the one behind you. That's easiest. If it's really flat, it will probably work fine. You don't have to make it all perfect, but come back to your seat and bring your left knee open like you would a pigeon pose, and bring the right leg to stretch back. And now when you come around to hands, knees, I guess that doesn't matter if you're on left or right side. Don't know where I was thinking on that one, but hands and knees. Feel that pattern in your back. So you're gonna hollow through the belly like you've got a giant beach ball here. And you wanna notice as if you have that roundness. If you have one of those giant theraballs, right? Those are great to lie over from time to time and get this lift of your back. So I would use that again if you have one around. And now as you arch your back, lift up the head, and then round your back. So you start to feel movement flowing. Hands go out wide as they can on your mat. Now when you move forward, feel how the arms are straight, toes relaxed, and then come all the way forward into lifting your head. So you're arching, and then you're flowing your head down, and then you're reaching back all the way with the arms lengthening. So they're pretty straight. There we go. Now round your back. So you come forward to what we would call up dog. Lift up through the chest, right in the slender part of the upper core, right where the ribs intersect, to the heart. Cool. Next time you come back to table, we're going to shift back to get a block set under each hand. And I like it if you can let the legs, this is kind of going on a different stretch of thoughts today, isn't it? But take the step of the right foot between your blocks. So it's like your foot takes away some of the weight in the hands. So it's true. It's like another limb there. So it's changed it. But I want you to use that weight in your foot so much that you can actually lift off of actually the weight in the foot is what I really get that focus, so that your back knee is either on the blanket or it's off. If you need to lift it up, that's okay. But I want you to emphasize trying to get up. Now this is more challenging if your knee is not on the blanket, right? If you were in a little bit more of a high lunge, we'll give you bonus points. But if you have your knee down, you can also work on that stretch in the front of the left thigh, okay? So if it's a real task for you to have your knee on the blanket, of course, you might move your blanket so it's farther back, just a little bit under your knee. But we're working on kind of opening up this front of the left hip to get a hold of that connection. And then those of us that can work a little further, we're going to lower the hands down. This will be for all of us with the back knee off the blanket. We'll lift up the back knee. You'll press back into the heel off of the floor, so it's a straight reach to the back heel. And then work your way of moving your head forward. Be cautious that you're not kind of pushing your head up towards the ceiling, but you just create movement. So it's not crown of the head forward, but you move your head forward, tilt, a little bit of arch in the neck. And then bring your right hand to your sacrum. And you'll have to monitor where your left foot is for your balance. But likely if your foot is stepped a little out to the left side, you're going to feel like you're a little more balanced, less falling over. And then turn to your right. So you're stretching through your right leg. See if you can straighten out the right leg a bit. Try to push back so you're lengthening your right thigh. And turn to your right and lift the right arm up. So a lot of awareness is in your left hand now. If that's like, oh, it's too much in my hand, what you might do is bring your knuckle down that block on the left side. You can spider the hand. You could turn the block a little lower and spider the hand. It's a little easier to get the block that way. But I want you to kind of be a little cautious of the hand position if it's hurting you. If it doesn't, you can work with that reach down to the right foot. Now coming out, we're going to lower the right hand to the block. We're going to position our left foot pressing down and come into this full forward bend. So the back heel presses towards the floor. And I try to let my spine move out of the pelvis. The spine spills out of the pelvis here. Okay, so it is a full forward bend. If you want to go further and bring the blocks all the way down and bring your head towards your leg, that's fine. But I don't imagine that's going to be as easy for you today because of the leg prep we did. It was a lot of leg hip strengthening, so it's probably a little rigid, but do what you can. So let's move so that left heel is up and we package both feet together. Step them forward, left foot forward to right. Feel the feet as close as you want. They might not be touching even at the big toes, but feel them under your pelvis, really under your sitting bones, kind of notice that. And then you're gonna lift up your sitting bones and let your head lower down towards the legs, towards the feet, kind of bowing into your legs. Eyes could be open or closed. Let the weight of your head stretch the spine. Good. So keeping with that pattern of bending your knees again. Feel that scoop of the back, like there's a little bit of roundedness through your back of your pelvis here. And I want you to stay balanced with that. Bend the knees, lift up your head, and then step back with the right leg, reaching. And I want you to lower that knee to the blanket. Okay, and if you don't prefer that, then you can always choose what's best for you, right? That may work for some, and maybe not. Okay. So pattern the left knee to press down into your heel, right? Kind of consider if you were creating a leg, like you were going to make one, what would the forces need to be? How you're trying to generate it around the ankle. That's a really interesting, how it rotates the bottom of it, right, the foot below, and how it keeps the bone above straight and pressed in. It's fascinating. So when you reach down through that right thigh stretching, the back leg is just stretching, front of the thigh, that's it. That's the focus. Even if I got a tangent on the foot, it's the hip flexor stretching. Okay, now give it a try. This time when we do blend coming up, I want you to press back into the right foot. So if your toes are straight back, which is a good position to stretch your quad, you're going to lower down so the toes hook under. So that's going to bring you an ability to lift your back knee. And you might stay with that lunge for quite some time and feel the connectivity of your hands on the blocks. Maybe you bring them up, maybe you lower them down. But I want you to try to reach back into that right heel and kind of smooth out so you're stretching into your right calf for a moment. See if you can reach back to the bottom of that right foot all the way towards the calf. If it doesn't touch anywhere near down the heel, you are going to need to step your foot out wider, which will tip your hips out, right? So left foot is parallel. My block's going to come up all the way. Now let's say this doesn't work with your hands, but you like the height. What you can do is be careful to switch over, but you can put two blocks flat under your right hand, and you can spider the hand that way, and then bring the left hand to the sacrum and turn. So sometimes that works really good. I'm a fan of the two blocks. Yeah, if your right heel is managing, moving downwards, try to keep that. You might have to step your foot a little bit forward or a little bit out. Lengthen through that left leg. Try to straighten it out. Good. Feel the abdomen rotate or try to. Breathe. It only helps. That could be a moment, Floy, when you get it unmute, right? You miss saying that in class, I think. Breathe, it only helps. Okay, now that left leg is lengthening. It's trying its darndest, okay? Same as when we did on our back, when we had our belt and our foot, we were pushing the same darn thing, except this is weight bearing, right? So I want you to work with that left arm. I think last time I had my arm not exactly on my back the whole time I was maneuvering, but when you feel that tummy turn, you're gonna lower that left hand down. And this time we're gonna get both blocks. So we got one under each hand for certain. If you didn't ever change, you were probably there all along. But feel the left knee bend and then straighten it back. So we're gonna do each side for this. So you're gonna bend the left knee so it's above the ankle and then swing back so the toes are up, okay? Alternate and try to move your heart forward and then push back, head down, chest forward and back. Now I want us to keep this with a little bit of lift. So next time you push back, use that momentum and step the right foot forward and then step the left foot back. Okay, so you find momentum, you lunge forward, the back knee is way off the floor, and then you pulse back, toes up, right foot. Motion forward, so feel the knee bend, feel the thigh motion, and then push back, head down. Couple more times, feel where that lunge works and that motion into your legs. Now, next time you flow forward, let's turn to our left so we have a wide stance. Okay, this is prep pigeon right now. So we're going to do inner thigh, both inner thighs have a wide pattern, and you might put your block down or maybe go without. So there would be probably 3 varieties here. Some could be on their blocks in a wide downward dog pose. Hands could be on the floor, head down. And you can also put your hands back in line with your feet. Well, actually just your line with your toes, right? Your fingers, and bring the crown of your head down. If you're there, if you're that far through, encourage the thighs to lift up like you're pulling up your kneecaps, drawing them up. So you do want to have a focus where you have support in the leg bands. Okay, like there's bands, or you're trying to pull up a long pair of socks. So you want to work with that either direction. If my hands are forward on the blocks, then I do want to keep those thighs lifting. That's a challenge. Yeah, they like to sag down, right? The skin on the top just likes to drop with gravity. So you've got to resist that pattern for the moment, for the exercise. You'll have many more hours to do the other direction. Okay, good. So if you're between, right, your head is down center, feel if the elbows can motion back as if there's a little bit more weight that's moving into your hands, but not so much to harm the wrist at all. So it would be almost the position of your palms is wide, your elbows squeeze in, and then the spine opens. Okay, so if your head is down, or if it's close to down, it doesn't have to touch the blanket or the floor, but if you find that balance between the two in your inversion, go for it. Okay, take a few more moments, breathe. We're all in different variations. Now the thighs lifting is the big part. So when you do start to come back up, walking your hands forward or putting your hands to lift up your head and come back center, let's meet. So we scooch our toes and our heels in. And then I want you to find this wide stance. Keep the thighs very toned, okay? And you'll walk your blocks back towards your right foot. And what you're gonna take is to work your way into pigeon. So kind of feel this swiveling of the foot and the back thigh. And then you'll need, I would use 2 blankets, or you can use your bolster for pigeon. Do which you want. Do you like a bolster under you when you do pigeon pose? Or do you prefer the blankets and then the bolster in front of you? So it's really should be individual. So if you decide, okay, I'll go with my blankets, then I'll keep it here, walk my right foot to the left side of the mat, knee open, and then slide my seat back to my blanket. So I do want to get my seat on my blanket. Does that make sense? So if you use your bolster, it's kind of perfect because you can find your seat on your bolster easy. Blankets are a little different. So choose, and if you have no bolster under your seat, you can have your bolster in front of you under your arms. And if you have a bolster under your seat, you can have your arms on the floor or your blocks or your blanket. It all kind of works itself, but the encouraging position is the direction of the right knee open. If this doesn't feel an effect in your knee, which is possibly a positive pattern if we have support, I want you to let the back leg relax. All right, so get a feel your back foot is relaxing. Your hips are centering. Gentle arch in the spine. Now work towards releasing around the hip. Mentally, physically, there's certainly some pressures, right, around the hip itself to loosen. Now, before we shift the sides, since we have different versions with our props, but the same ideal with the pose, really feel that you load into your right hip. Okay, so you're kind of leaning over to that right hip right now. And then when I move my hands back in, I'm going to move the left leg forward. So whether I'm my blanket or my bolster here under my thighs, it's either way, right? You're going to swing forward. Now, let's say in between in the front, you want to take a simple left foot crossed in front of the right shin and take a little forward fold. You could be on your bolster or on your blanket for either. It works the same. And lean forward and have your blocks maybe under your hands or your bolster in front of you. Could be either, would be perfect with the block or bolster, but your left leg is crossed in front of the right, minus a sandbag, right? So you're tilting your body weight forward and down. So encouraging for your spine strength here. Breathing, leaning and breathing. And now we'll take that second pigeon. Now this left hip was kind of warmed into it already. So when I move into my second side, right leg reaches back, left leg forward, I hope. And when you lengthen from that left knee tip forward and the right hip, frontal hip bone down to the knee, and you lower down either on your blocks or your bolster. You can change your bolster if you have that in front of you across. And weight into the left leg. And let the spine kind of sink into itself and satisfy that circulation into your hips. So partial focus is the sensation, and then consistently aligning so that even if the sensation is pretty in depth, but you have some pretty decent alignment, you want to stay on track through the intensity, unless it's clearly numbing or tingling or in a pain position you need to get out, of course do so. Take care of yourself. Yeah, for many of us, the left knee pointing out, also it comes in handy to scoot your left foot a little farther up sometimes, but that's not easy for everybody's knee or hip, or, so if my hip is a little bit, been doing some strength work, or been doing a lot of walking, which strengthens in that joint, it can be really tight. So you might really lay into that pigeon version or the seated hip openers for a good solid minute to even make a dent, right? Don't make any dents, but this final few moments here, this has been a pretty full sequence for these areas. Not a lot of lounging around today, huh? A little bit, it feels like it when we're laying on our back, but slightly active. Now, if you're a little bit kind of cattywampus in your lower core, notice, I don't know if you have to notice that you're cattywampus, but notice the tilt in your left leg. And then as you walk the hands up onto that bolster or onto the blocks or the floor, you're going to unwind. So come out of your pigeon and take that final seated forward fold. So I have my right foot forward and my left shin. It doesn't have to be knee, but for me, it ended up my foot was in front of the lower knee frame. And then I'm in that cross-legged position. I lean forward. And I like this version after pigeon. It's kind of refreshing from one hip to the next. Okay, so we're going to set up for our final pose in a moment. So I want you to kind of scan kind of your layers of sensation right now. What feels like it could use some clear openness. And if your legs are tight, like you feel this at the top of the leg, You might like to do legs up the wall because that's going to be a really good leg flush, right? It's fuller flush of the legs than if you were on your bolster bench. But if you want bolster bench because it's easy and enticing to get to something simple, that's perfect for the brain. Go there. And if you feel like a chair shoulder stand, you could do that as well. And then when you come back up through center, I'm going to go bolster bench. It's easier to observe versus coming off over to off screen to, camera to the wall. But if you want to do legs at the wall, you'll put your bolster at the base of the wall. And if you're going to do bolster bench, you'll put your blocks underneath your bolster. Okay, so that's going to bring us the height up. Now, I think a blanket, either swaddling the legs after they've maybe done a little bit of tiring work could be nice, or a sandbag across them. So you choose, but if you're going to swaddle up, remember you want more blanket, not less. So you want to feel as if you really have that wrap of the leg. So you're wrapping it, and it's easy. The bigger the blanket, the easier it'll be to wrap as much, right? So that could be nice and actually helpful with the draining. So when you lower down on spine, be sure your blanket is only supporting your brain, not your neck so much. So it's higher up. Good. And then you can add your sand to work on the diaphragmatic breathing, and or let your sand be on the floor. Okay. Could be on your shins, right? It could be on your ribs. It could be on your belly. So I'm going to put my sand below my sternum so it really feels like it's on the cross layer of my rib cage, and let the arms lower down. Right, for those of us that are able to stay these extra few moments, if you have to go early, have a great day. But otherwise, will be a few moments over time. So let the arms settle down so the palms gently curl. And the arms could be where they're comfortable for your back. So offer a variation, whatever pose you're in, so that the arm direction is easeful for your back. Great. If you're at legs up the wall, you might have the arms so they're open from the pits and the hands straight back in cactus. And if you're with the legs at the bolster, they're likely a little lower. Feel the lift of the belly with the inhale. And feel the relaxation of the core to the spine. And the diaphragm, as the core lowers down to the spine, the diaphragm actually shifts up and lands at the base of the heart, opening the heart. So exploring the movement of breathing in the body, moving with that layer of breath conditioning, right, for the heart, for the lungs. Let this pose be of service to your legs, surrendering, draining, slowing down. So feel as you in-breath for a count of 4, filling the lungs. Exhaling out through the mouth for a count of 5 to 6. Sweeping, letting go. And feeling that zone of attention in your mid-body flow outwards to your extremities. And then from your single self, we'll start to move a little bit into the collective. So as we come back into the awareness, I know it's in your unique space, but we are connecting in this way we do. So let your arms go a little closer in. If you're at the wall, you'll start to bend your knees and bring your feet to Baddha Konasana, soles together, knees open, hands at the legs, helping them improve that circulation in the thighs. And those of us on the bolster, we'll move our sand, we'll all move our sand away. And we'll shift our knees so they glide in towards your chest and hug them in. Hug them in. Hagamasana. Feel the knees when they're drawing in and the spine gently lengthening into the back of the pelvis, into the buttocks. And as you approach rocking and then eventually coming up, you might get a reach of your knees in so you feel that full stretch in your back, and then roll and let the body be held up by the spine. See if you can find a sitting position where you feel your spine lifting, whether you're on a blanket or you're just kind of pure on floor, and feel where the spine circulation is toned out of the pelvis up to the brain. Reach your hands together at the heart forward and bowing into the heart center, surrendering here. Let's capture an instant of breathing and focusing on the collective and out, uniting our breath in, and with exhalation, bowing into that space behind your heart. And in gratitude, namaste. Thank you.
Thanks.